Billionaire CEO went undercover as a poor man. A waitress and her daughter's kindness changed everything. What if the person serving your coffee knew something about life that you, despite all your wealth and power, had completely forgotten? Marcus Ashford sat in his corner office on the 47th floor, staring at the city lights below. At 52, he had everything money could buy: 3 homes, a private jet, a company worth billions, but the reflection staring back at him from the window looked hollow. His assistant had just delivered the quarterly reports. Profits were up. Stock prices soared. His shareholders were ecstatic. Yet Marcus felt nothing. He couldn't remember the last time he'd had a real conversation with someone who didn't want something from him. When was the last time someone had looked at him and seen Marcus, not his bank account? He loosened his tie and made a decision that would change everything. Tomorrow, he would disappear. Not as Marcus Ashford, CEO. Just as Marcus. A question for you. Where are you watching from tonight? The next morning, Marcus walked past his driver without a word, ignoring the confused look on the man's face. He'd left his Rolex at home, traded his tailored suit for jeans and a worn jacket he'd found in his guest closet, probably left behind by a contractor years ago. He took the subway for the first time in 20 years. The rattle of the train, the press of strangers, the smell of coffee and morning newspapers, it felt like stepping into someone else's life. He found himself in a neighborhood he'd never noticed before, despite driving past it 1,000 times on his way to the office. Small shops lined the street. A barber pole spun lazily. Kids walked to school with backpacks almost as big as they were. And there, tucked between a laundromat and a hardware store, was Rosie's Diner. The red vinyl booths visible through the window looked like they'd been there since the 70s. Marcus pushed open the door, and a bell chimed overhead. The woman behind the counter looked up and smiled. Not the practiced smile of someone who recognized him and wanted to impress him. Just a genuine, warm smile. She was maybe 35, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her eyes a striking shade of green that reminded him of sea glass. Her name tag read, Celia. "Sit anywhere you'd like, honey," she said, already reaching for the coffee pot. Marcus slid into a booth by the window and watched her move through the diner with easy efficiency. She refilled cups, joked with the regulars, remembered how everyone took their coffee without asking. There was a grace to her movements, a contentment that seemed completely at odds with the fluorescent lights and cracked linoleum. "What can I get you?" she asked, notepad ready. "Just coffee and whatever you recommend," Marcus said. Celia laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "Brave man, trusting a stranger's taste. I'll bring you the special. You won't regret it." As she walked away, Marcus noticed the small things. Her shoes were worn at the heels. There was a patch on her apron, neatly sewn. But she carried herself like royalty, head high, shoulders back. When she returned with his breakfast, eggs, hash browns, toast that smelled like heaven, she set it down with a flourish. "First time here?" she asked. "That obvious? You're looking around like you've never seen a diner before." She grinned. "Don't worry. We don't bite. Well, Frank over there might, but only if you try to take his crossword puzzle." An old man at the counter chuckled without looking up from his newspaper. Marcus ate slowly, savoring each bite. When was the last time he'd actually tasted his food instead of eating while reading reports or taking calls? Celia checked on him twice, each time with that same genuine warmth, asking nothing, expecting nothing. Then the door opened, and a little girl burst in, backpack bouncing. She couldn't have been more than 8, with wild curls and her mother's green eyes. "Mama!" she called out, rushing to Celia. Celia's whole face transformed. "Hey, baby girl. How was school?" "Mrs. Patterson said my story was the best in class." The girl was practically vibrating with excitement. "That's my Emma," Celia said, pulling her daughter close. "You're going to be a famous writer someday." Marcus watched them, something tightening in his chest. The way Celia looked at her daughter, like she was the most precious thing in the world, reminded him of something he'd lost. Or maybe something he'd never had. Emma noticed him watching and waved shyly. Marcus waved back, and for the first time in months, he smiled without thinking about it. Marcus started coming to Rosie's diner every day. He told Celia his name was Mark, that he was between jobs, trying to figure things out. It wasn't entirely a lie. He was trying to figure things out. He just left out the part about the billions and the boardrooms. Celia treated him like she treated everyone, with kindness that cost nothing but meant everything. She never asked why a man who was between jobs always left generous tips. She just smiled and thanked him, and sometimes she'd sit with him for a few minutes during slow hours, sharing stories about Emma's latest adventure or the regulars who'd been coming to the diner for decades. "You know what I love about this place," she said one afternoon, refilling his coffee. "Everyone who walks through that door gets treated the same. Doesn't matter if you're wearing a suit or haven't showered in a week. You're hungry, we feed you. You're lonely, we talk to you. Simple as that." Emma started joining them after school, doing her homework in Marcus's booth. She'd narrate her stories to him while he listened, genuinely fascinated by her imagination. She wrote about dragons who were afraid of butterflies and princesses who saved themselves. "You're good at this," Marcus told her one day. "Really good." Emma beamed. "Mama says words are magic. You can make people feel things that aren't even real." "Your mama's a smart woman." "The smartest," Emma agreed solemnly. "She knows everything. Well, almost everything. She doesn't know how we're gonna pay for the new shoes I need for gym class, but she says we'll figure it out. We always do." The casual mention hit Marcus like a punch. He looked at Celia, chatting with another customer, that same bright smile on her face. He'd assumed, what? That everyone was fine. That minimum wage and tips were enough to make ends meet? He'd been so disconnected from reality that he'd forgotten what struggling actually meant. That evening, he lingered after closing time, helping Celia wipe down tables even though she insisted he didn't have to. "Mark," she said, her voice softer than usual. "Can I ask you something?" His heart jumped. "Sure. Emma really likes you. She talks about you all the time. Mark said this and Mark thinks that." Celia paused, choosing her words carefully. "I just need to know you're not going to disappear on her. She's had enough people leave." Marcus met her eyes, seeing the protectiveness there, the fierce love of a mother who'd been hurt before and wouldn't let her daughter experience the same. "I'm not going anywhere," he promised. And he meant it. Celia's shoulders relaxed. "Good. Because honestly, you're good for her. For both of us." She laughed, a little embarrassed. "It's nice having a friend who doesn't just see me as the waitress." If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. The next morning, Marcus arrived to find the diner dark. A handwritten sign hung on the door, "Closed due to emergency." His stomach dropped. He pulled out his real phone, the one he'd been ignoring for 2 weeks, and somehow, through connections he'd built over the years, he found out what happened. Emma was in the hospital. Appendicitis. Emergency surgery. And Celia had no insurance. Marcus stood outside the county hospital, his heart pounding in a way it never did during million-dollar negotiations. He'd made calls from the parking lot, discreetly ensuring Emma was getting the best care possible without revealing himself. The surgery had gone well, but the bills were already mounting, and he knew Celia was drowning in worry she couldn't afford. He found her in the pediatric ward, slumped in a chair beside Emma's bed, her hand wrapped around her daughter's small fingers. She looked exhausted, her eyes red from crying, still wearing yesterday's clothes. When she saw him, her face crumpled with relief. "Mark," she whispered, not wanting to wake Emma. "You came." "Of course I came." He sat beside her, and without thinking, she leaned her head on his shoulder. He held very still, feeling the weight of her trust like something sacred. "I don't know what I'm going to do," Celia said quietly. "The surgery alone is $15,000. And that's just the beginning. They want to keep her for 3 more days. I have maybe $2,000 in savings. I've already called my landlord to beg for an extension on rent, and I'm picking up extra shifts wherever I can find them, but... Her voice broke. Marcus felt his chest tighten, anger and shame washing over him in equal measure. He'd spent $15,000 on a watch once. On a whim. Because it looked nice. And here was this woman, this incredible mother, breaking herself apart trying to save her daughter. Celia, he said carefully. What if someone wanted to help? Anonymously. She pulled back, looking at him with those sea-glass eyes. What do you mean? I mean, what if the hospital bills were taken care of? What would you say? I'd say that's a beautiful dream, but dreams don't pay bills. She wiped her eyes. I appreciate the thought though. You being here helps more than you know. I feel less alone. Marcus had never felt more like a fraud in his life. Here he was, sitting on the solution to all her problems, but he couldn't tell her. Not yet. Because if he told her who he really was, everything would change. She'd see him differently. The easy friendship they'd built would shatter under the weight of his deception. Emma stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Mama, I'm right here, baby girl. Is Mark here too? Emma's voice was groggy from the medication. I'm here, Emma, Marcus said, moving closer. She smiled weakly. I had a dream you were a wizard who could fix everything with magic.
I missed you.
Just a regular guy, Marcus said, his throat tight. But you know what? Sometimes regular people can do extraordinary things when they care about someone. Emma's hand found his. Do you care about us? More than you know, Marcus said, and he'd never meant anything more in his life. Have you ever faced something like this, where you wanted to help but didn't know how? Let us know in the comments. After Celia fell asleep in the chair, Marcus stepped into the hallway and made a call to his CFO. I need you to set up an anonymous donor fund. Route it through the hospital foundation. Make it look like a general charity grant. And I need it done today. Marcus? Is that you? Where have you been? The board is. Today, Marcus repeated. I'll explain everything later. Just do this for me. He hung up and leaned against the wall, his carefully constructed walls crumbling. He'd come to the diner looking for authenticity, for something real. He'd found it. But now he stood at a crossroads, knowing that the moment of truth was coming, and he had no idea if Celia would forgive him for the lie. 2 days later, a hospital administrator knocked on Emma's door with news that left Celia speechless. An anonymous donor had covered all of Emma's medical expenses, surgery, hospital stay, medication, everything. Even the follow-up appointments for the next 6 months. Celia stood there, shaking her head. That's not possible. People don't just do things like that. Apparently, this one does, the administrator said with a smile. There's a note. It just says, for Emma's future stories. Celia looked at Marcus, her eyes wide with wonder and confusion. He kept his expression neutral, but inside, his heart was racing. She suspected. He could see it in the way she watched him, the questions forming behind her eyes. Emma was discharged the next morning. Marcus offered to drive them home, and Celia accepted, too tired to argue. In the car, Emma chattered away about the nurses and the Jell-O and the TV in her room, while Celia sat quietly, her hand resting on her daughter's shoulder. When they reached Celia's apartment, a modest place above a dry cleaner, Marcus helped Emma inside and got her settled on the couch with blankets and her favorite books. Mark, Celia said, stepping onto the small balcony. Come here for a minute. He followed her out, knowing what was coming. She turned to face him, arms crossed. Who are you, really? I'm exactly who I've been these past few weeks, Marcus said carefully. No, you're not. Her voice was quiet but firm. The way you talk sometimes. The things you know. And that donation, $15,000 with a note about Emma's stories? Only one person knew I called her that. Only one person heard her talk about being a writer. Marcus's carefully constructed world tilted on its axis. He could lie. He should lie. But when he looked at Celia, this woman who'd shown him what real wealth looked like, he couldn't do it anymore. My name is Marcus Ashford, he said quietly. Her eyes widened. Even in this neighborhood, everyone knew that name. The Marcus Ashford? The CEO? Yes. Celia stepped back as if he'd slapped her. This whole time. You've been lying to me this whole time. I never lied about the important things, Marcus said desperately. Everything I felt, everything I said to you and Emma, that was real. Real. Celia's voice cracked. You played dress-up with my life. You came to my diner, let me pour my heart out to you, let my daughter get attached to you, and it was all, what? Some kind of social experiment? Did you get what you were looking for? Did you find out how the poor people live? Celia, please. I trusted you. Tears streamed down her face. I told Emma you wouldn't leave. I promised her. And I won't. I'm not leaving. You already did, Celia said. The moment you lied about who you were, you left. The Mark I knew doesn't exist. He never did. She went inside and closed the door, leaving Marcus alone on the balcony, feeling more lost than he'd felt in that corner office, staring at the city lights. If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. Marcus had spent his whole life solving problems with money and power. But standing there, shut out from the only place that had felt like home in years, he realized that some things couldn't be bought. Some things had to be earned. And he had no idea if Celia would ever give him the chance to try. Marcus didn't go back to his office. He didn't return to his penthouse. Instead, he sat in his car outside Celia's apartment for hours, watching the lights in her window, trying to figure out how to make this right. Money wouldn't fix this. Power wouldn't fix this. For the first time in his adult life, he had to rely on something he'd almost forgotten he had, his humanity. The next morning, he was waiting outside Rosie's diner when Celia arrived to open up. She froze when she saw him, her hand tightening on her keys. I'm not here as Marcus Ashford, CEO, he said before she could speak. I'm here as the man who learned what it means to be human again because a waitress and her daughter showed him kindness without expecting anything in return. Celia's jaw tightened. Pretty speech. It's the truth. Marcus took a breath. You asked me who I am, really. I'm a man who spent 20 years building an empire and forgot why any of it mattered. I'm someone who had everything and felt nothing. And then I walked into a diner and met someone who had almost nothing but felt everything. You taught me that, Celia. You and Emma. By lying to us? I was lying to myself long before I lied to you, Marcus said quietly. I thought if I stripped away the money and the title, I'd find out who I really was. What I found was that I'd been empty for so long, I'd forgotten what it felt like to be full. You filled that emptiness. Not with anything you did for me, but just by being who you are. Someone who sees people, really sees them, and treats them with dignity. Celia's eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. I'm sorry, Marcus continued. I'm sorry I wasn't honest from the start. I'm sorry I made you feel like an experiment. You weren't. You're the most real thing that's happened to me in 20 years. And Emma, his voice caught. Emma reminds me what hope looks like. What pure, untainted goodness looks like. I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose you. Celia was quiet for a long moment. Then she unlocked the diner door and pushed it open. Come inside. They sat across from each other in their old booth as the morning sun streamed through the windows. Celia poured 2 cups of coffee, his the way he liked it, which she'd memorized weeks ago. Emma asked about you last night, she said. She wanted to know when you were coming back. What did you tell her? I told her the truth. That you're someone important who has a lot of responsibilities. And that sometimes, important people can't always be where they want to be. Marcus's heart sank. But then, Celia continued, a small smile tugging at her lips. She told me something. She said, Mama, Importance isn't about what you have. It's about who you are when nobody's watching. She's 8 years old, and she's wiser than most adults I know. She learned that from you, Marcus said. Maybe. Or maybe she learned it from you. Celia reached across the table and took his hand. I'm still hurt. And I'm still processing all of this. But I also know that the man who sat with my daughter in the hospital, who listened to her stories like they were the most important things in the world, who held me while I cried, that man was real. I don't care what his name is or how much money he has. That man matters. Marcus squeezed her hand, feeling tears he hadn't cried in decades sliding down his face. 3 months later, Marcus had restructured his company's charitable foundation, focusing on helping working families access healthcare and education. He still ran his company, but he did it differently now. With purpose, with heart, with the memory of a diner and the people who'd saved him. And every Sunday without fail, he had breakfast at Rosie's Diner, sitting in his booth by the window, listening to Emma's latest story while Celia poured coffee and smiled at the man who'd learned that the richest life isn't measured in dollars, but in moments of connection, kindness, and love. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Thank you for joining us on this journey. May you find the same richness in your own life, not in what you have, but in who you choose to be.